The chain rattles as he jerks me forward, and I stumble, hands bound, knees scraping ancient stone, the entire Ironfang pack watching in silence. Alpha Smith Jones doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His black wolf prowls beside him like a living shadow, its eyes burning gold in the cathedral's half-light. I ran. I almost made it to freedom. But alphas don't forgive betrayal. And wolfless girls don't escape prophecy. The moment I'm forced to kneel before the altar, something inside me cracks open, not fear, not shame, something ancient. The chains begin to glow. The air bends around me like gravity itself is confused. And for the first time in my 19 years of invisible existence, I feel dangerous. They wanted to bind me. Instead, they woke me. Bertie Krause had spent 19 years learning how to disappear. In a pack where strength was worshipped and dominance carved into every stone of the fortress walls, a girl whose wolf never surfaced was less than nothing. She was a whisper in the shadows. A mistake no one bothered to correct. A body that took up space but held no power. She learned early to keep her head down, to move through the Ironfang stronghold like smoke, present but untouchable, noticed but never seen. The trainers who cracked their staffs against her ribs when she fell behind in drills barely remembered her name by morning. The pack mothers who handed out rations gave her the smallest portions without meeting her eyes. Even her own reflection seemed apologetic, as if her body knew it had failed some fundamental test of existence. No one looked at Bertie Krause and saw a future. No one except Smith Jones. The future Alpha saw everything. Every bruise she tried to hide beneath long sleeves. Every time she flinched when warriors passed too close. Every moment she stood at the edge of training circles, watching wolves shift and fight with a longing so sharp it could cut. Every quiet act of defiance when she refused to quit despite having no wolf to prove her worth. He watched her the way predators watch prey, patient, calculating, inevitable. And then, on the night of the autumn equinox, 3 days before his official ascension to Alpha, the moon cast her silver judgment through the sacred scrying pool. The entire pack gathered in the ceremonial cavern as the elders chanted, as the water glowed, as fate herself bent down to whisper a name. Bertie Krause. The words echoed off stone walls like a death knell. The wolfless girl. Fated mate to Alpha Smith Jones. The next Luna of Ironfang. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the roar, not of celebration, but of outrage. Warriors shouted protests. Elders called it a mistake, a curse, an insult to generations of strong bloodlines. Mothers clutched their daughters and whispered prayers of protection. The council surrounded Smith, demanding he reject the bond, claiming the moon had been poisoned by dark magic. Through it all, Smith said nothing. He stood at the pool's edge, arms crossed, his massive black wolf sitting beside him like a throne of shadow and teeth. His eyes, storm-gray and unreadable, found Bertie in the crowd. She stood frozen, heart hammering against her ribs, hands shaking so badly she had to clasp them behind her back. She waited for him to refuse. He didn't. He tilted his head slightly, as if seeing her for the first time. As if considering whether she was worth the fight he knew was coming. Then he turned to the council and said, "The moon has spoken. Prepare the binding ceremony." That was 4 days ago. 4 days of being moved into guarded chambers. 4 days of cold meals delivered by silent servants. 4 days of suffocating under the weight of a fate she never asked for, chained to a man she barely knew and feared completely. The binding ceremony wasn't like the weddings Bertie had seen in storybooks or heard about from travelers passing through pack lands. There were no flowers. No music. No joyful tears. It was a militaristic ritual, ancient, brutal, and absolute. Runes carved into stone. Blood mixed with ash. Vows enforced by magic so old it predated the first packs. It wasn't about love. It was about power. About locking a Luna to an Alpha so tightly that betrayal became physically impossible. And Bertie Krause, wolfless and powerless, would be bound to the most feared Alpha in the Northern Territories. She couldn't breathe thinking about it. So she made a choice. She would run. She spent those 4 days preparing in secret. She stole a heavy human cloak from the storage rooms, dark enough to blend into shadows. She hoarded rations, dried meat, stale bread, a canteen she filled from the kitchens when no one was watching. She memorized patrol schedules, listened to guards complain about shift rotations, noted when the eastern gate had the fewest eyes. And on the night before the ceremony, when the moon hung low and full, Bertie Krause slipped out of her chambers like a ghost returning to the grave. Every step felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. She moved through corridors she'd haunted for years, past the great hall where tomorrow's ritual would take place, past the armory where weapons gleamed in the dark, past the kennels where wolves growled in their sleep. Her heart beat so loud she was certain someone would hear it. But no one stopped her. She reached the eastern gate just as the guard rotation shifted. 3 precious minutes of distraction. She didn't waste them. The forest swallowed her whole. For the first time in her life, Bertie ran without looking back. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs trembled, until the fortress disappeared behind walls of pine and shadow. She ran through streams to hide her scent, over roots and rocks, deeper and deeper into the wild lands where pack laws didn't reach. And as dawn broke pale and trembling over the valley's edge, Bertie Krause collapsed against a birch tree and let herself believe the impossible. She had made it. She was free. She pulled the hood of her stolen cloak tighter, clutched the rough bark, and whispered a goodbye to a life she never wanted. To a fate she refused. To an Alpha she would never kneel before. The morning air tasted like pine and rain and hope. She didn't notice the pair of glowing golden eyes that opened in the shadows behind her. She didn't hear the low, rumbling growl of the black wolf that had been following her since she left the gate. She didn't feel the inevitability closing in like a trap she'd walked into willingly. For one perfect, fragile moment, Bertie Krause tasted freedom. It was the last time she would ever feel it. Round pushpin comment below where you're watching from, which country or state is following Bertie's story. Let me know if you'd run too, or if you'd face the Alpha head-on. Backhand index pointing down ***. Smith Jones woke to the sound of his door slamming open. He was on his feet before his eyes fully adjusted to the pre-dawn darkness, instinct snapping his body into readiness. His black wolf surged beneath his skin, a living shadow coiled tight and ready to strike. Elder Torin stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 council guards. The old man's face was carved from stone and fury. She's gone. 2 words. That's all it took for Smith's world to tilt sideways. What do you mean gone? His voice came out low, dangerous. The kind of tone that made warriors take a step back. Torin didn't flinch. Your mate fled in the night. The wolfless girl ran like the coward she is, and now the entire pack will pay for your council's arrogance in accepting the moon's mistake. Smith's wolf snarled inside his chest, a sound that didn't make it past his throat but rattled his bones nonetheless. The mate bond, that thing he'd been trying to ignore, trying to understand, trying to reconcile with duty, suddenly pulled taut as a bowstring. It didn't hurt exactly. It burned. A hot, twisting sensation in his chest that told him exactly what he didn't want to admit. She was far. Getting farther. And every instinct in his body screamed at him to chase. When? Smith demanded, already moving toward his weapons belt. Sometime after midnight. The Eastern Gate rotation. She planned this. Torin's lip curled with disgust. A wolfless girl outsmarted your guards, Alpha. What does that say about Ironfang's strength? Smith ignored the barb and strapped on his blade, his mind already calculating routes, distances, how much of a head start she had. 6 hours, maybe 7. Not impossible to track. Not if he shifted. The ceremony is at sunset, Torin continued, his voice sharpening. If she is not standing before that altar when the moon rises, the bond will fracture. The prophecy will fail. And every pack within 100 miles will see Ironfang as weak, led by an alpha who cannot even control his own mate. Smith's hand stilled on his belt buckle. Control. That word again. It was all the council ever talked about. Control the pack. Control the bloodlines. Control the future. They'd raised him on it since his father died in the border wars when Smith was 12. They'd molded him, shaped him, turned him into exactly what Ironfang needed. A weapon. Not a man. She's not a prisoner, Smith said quietly. No, Torin agreed. She's worse. She's a liability. And if you don't bring her back, every wolf in this pack will question whether you're strong enough to lead them. The words landed like stones in dark water, rippling outward. Smith knew the game. He'd been playing it his entire life. The council didn't serve him, they controlled him. Every decision filtered through their lens of political strategy and power preservation. They'd been furious when the moon named Birdie. A wolfless Luna was an embarrassment, a crack in Ironfang's armor of dominance. But Smith had accepted the bond anyway. Not because he wanted to. Not because he understood why the moon would choose someone so fragile, so breakable. But because rejecting a fated mate was a death sentence. The bond would rot inside him, turn toxic, drive his wolf mad. He'd seen it happen to other alphas. Watched them deteriorate into hollow shells. He'd chosen survival. Duty. The pack's future over his own confusion. And now she'd run. His wolf surged again, harder this time, battering against his control like a caged beast. Smith closed his eyes and reached for that thread of connection, the mate bond he'd been trying to ignore since the moon's proclamation. It was there. Faint but undeniable. A golden thread stretched taut across miles, pulling him east toward the valley border. And it was screaming. Not with words. With something older. Primal. The bond didn't care about politics or prophecies or council manipulation. It only knew one truth, mate in danger. Mate running. Mate afraid. Protect. I'll bring her back, Smith said, his voice flat. Torin nodded, satisfied. Take a war party. Make it public. The pack needs to see that defiance has consequences. Smith's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He couldn't. Not without fracturing the fragile authority he'd spent years building. The council held too many strings. Too many loyalists. If he showed weakness now, they'd replace him before winter. So he did what he always did. He obeyed. But as he walked past Torin into the cold morning air, his black wolf stirred with something that felt dangerously close to rebellion. The war party assembled in the courtyard within minutes, 10 of his best trackers, all shifted, all loyal. Or at least, loyal enough. Smith didn't trust anyone completely anymore. Not after years of watching the council whisper and scheme. He shifted as the first rays of sunlight broke over the fortress walls. His wolf was massive, easily twice the size of any normal shifter. Black as midnight, with eyes that burned gold and a presence that made even seasoned warriors uneasy. The elders called it a blessing. Smith called it a curse. The wolf was too strong, too violent, too hard to control. It didn't just want to dominate, it wanted to destroy. Except when it came to her. The memory surfaced unbidden as Smith's paws hit the forest floor. 3 months ago. Late evening. He'd been walking the training grounds when he heard the crack of wood against bone. He'd found Birdie on the ground, blood trickling from her split lip, while Trainer Gorvok stood over her with his staff raised. Useless, Gorvok had spat. Wolfless trash wasting our resources. Smith's wolf had exploded forward before he could think. He'd grabbed Gorvok by the throat and slammed him into the nearest wall hard enough to crack stone. The words that came out of his mouth were barely human. "Touch her again and I'll rip your spine out through your chest." Gorvok had gone pale. Nodded frantically. Smith had dropped him and walked away without looking at Birdie, without acknowledging the confusion in her wide eyes. He told himself it was pack law. Alphas protected the weak. That's all it was. But his wolf had purred with satisfaction. And when the moon named her 3 weeks later, Smith understood. His wolf had known before he did. Now, racing through the forest with his pack behind him, Smith felt that same protective fury rising. The bond pulled him forward, a compass pointing straight toward her. She'd crossed the river, smart, trying to hide her scent, but she couldn't hide from fate. The council wanted him to bring her back in chains. Wanted a spectacle. A lesson. Smith's wolf snarled at the thought, hackles rising. He didn't want to hurt her. He didn't even understand her. But the bond was screaming now, loud and insistent, and beneath the council's orders and the pack's expectations, Smith felt something dangerous stirring. She was his. Not because he chose her. Not because he understood why. But because the moon said so. And the bond didn't lie. His trackers fanned out, reading signs invisible to human eyes. Broken branches. Disturbed moss. The faint ghost of her scent clinging to bark. And then he saw it. A piece of torn fabric caught on a thorn bush. Dark wool. Human-made. The cloak she'd stolen. Smith shifted back to human form, standing naked in the dappled sunlight, his chest heaving. He lifted the fabric to his nose and breathed in. There. Beneath the smell of rain and pine, he caught it. Her scent. Faint and terrified and uniquely hers. His wolf roared with triumph. She was close. Smith looked east, toward the valley's edge where pack lands ended and wild territory began. Toward freedom she'd never reach. Move, he commanded, his voice carrying through the trees. She's half a mile ahead. The hunt wasn't over. It was just beginning. Birdie heard them before she saw them. The sound of paws on earth, dozens of them, moving in perfect synchronization through the forest like a living avalanche. Her heart, which had just begun to slow after hours of running, exploded back into panic. No. No, no, no. She'd been so close. The valley's edge was just beyond the next ridge. She could see open sky through the trees, taste freedom on the wind. She ran. Her human legs were nothing compared to wolves, but fear gave her speed she didn't know she possessed. Branches whipped her face. Roots tried to trip her. The stolen cloak caught on thorns and she ripped it free, leaving pieces of fabric behind like breadcrumbs marking her desperation. The warding river. If she could just reach it, cross it, the magic that protected pack lands would weaken their senses. It was her only chance. The water appeared through the trees like salvation, wide, rushing, cold enough to see mist rising off its surface. Birdie didn't hesitate. She plunged in, gasping as the icy current hit her legs, her waist, her chest. The bottom was slick with river stones and she slipped, went under, came up choking. Behind her, the wolves burst through the tree line. She saw him immediately. Smith Jones in his wolf form was a nightmare given flesh. Black as a starless sky, massive enough that his shoulder came up to a grown man's chest, eyes burning gold like captured sunlight. His pack fanned out along the riverbank, but none of them moved. They didn't need to. Smith stepped into the water. The warding magic crackled against his fur, blue sparks dancing across black, but he didn't slow. Didn't hesitate. The river that should have confused his senses, dulled his hunting instincts, might as well have been morning dew. He walked through it like a king through his own throne room. Birdie tried to swim. The current fought her, dragged at her cloak, filled her boots with water heavy as stones. She made it 3 strokes before her strength gave out. She went under again. Strong jaws closed around the back of her cloak and hauled her up. Smith dragged her to shore like a wolf bringing back a kill. She collapsed on the bank, coughing up river water, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Her hair plastered to her face. Her stolen cloak ruined and heavy. Every part of her screaming with cold and exhaustion and the crushing weight of failure. Smith shifted. One moment, a monster. The next, a man. He stood over her, naked and unbothered by it, his chest heaving with exertion that had nothing to do with the chase. Water dripped from his dark hair. His gray eyes burned with something that might have been fury or fear or both. You ran. His voice was quiet. Deadly quiet. Birdie couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. You ran from me. From the pack. From the moon's will. Each word fell like a stone into deep water. Do you have any idea what you've done? She found her voice then, raw and broken. I won't be your prisoner. Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or recognition. You already are. He pulled chains from the pack one of his wolves carried. Not rope. Not leather. Iron. Heavy, brutal iron forged for criminals and traitors, each link thick as her thumb. The sound they made as he lifted them was the death of hope. No. Birdie scrambled backward. Please, no. Smith caught her wrists. His hands were warm despite the river's cold. The mate bond flared between them, a shock of heat that made them both flinch. For a heartbeat, she saw something break in his expression. Regret. Hesitation. Then it was gone. He locked the chains around her wrists. The weight was immediate and devastating. The iron bit into her skin, cold and unyielding. She felt it in her bones, in her soul, the physical manifestation of everything she tried to escape. I'm sorry, Smith said, and he sounded like he meant it. But you belong to Ironfang. To me. And I can't let you go. The journey back was endless. Smith shifted again, his black wolf taking the lead. But he didn't drag her on foot. He made her walk. In chains. Through the forest she'd run through with hope. Past the river that had failed to save her. Back toward the fortress that would become her cage. The pack surrounded her like an honor guard. Or a funeral procession. By the time they reached Ironfang's gates, word had spread. The entire pack was waiting. They lined the path from the gates to the cathedral, warriors, mothers, children, elders. Hundreds of them. Silent and watching. Some faces showed pity. Others, satisfaction. Most were carefully blank. Birdie kept her head down, but Smith's wolf walked beside her, close enough that his fur brushed her leg with every step. A reminder. A claim. A promise. The cathedral loomed ahead, ancient and terrible. Built from stone so old it predated the packs themselves, its walls carved with runes that glowed faintly in daylight. The doors stood open like a mouth waiting to swallow her whole. Inside, the temperature dropped. Shadows pooled in corners despite the candles burning in iron sconces. The ceiling arched high overhead, disappearing into darkness. At the far end, the altar waited, carved from a single piece of obsidian, inscribed with binding runes that pulsed with dormant magic. Elder Torin stood before it, his expression carved from stone and triumph. "Bring her forward." Smith shifted back, and someone handed him clothes, dark leather and furred cloak. He dressed quickly, then took the chain connected to Bertie's wrists. His hand shook almost imperceptibly as he led her down the aisle. The pack filled in behind them, a wall of witnesses. When they reached the altar, Smith stopped. The chain between them hung heavy as sin. "Kneel," Torin commanded. Bertie's legs wouldn't move. Couldn't. Every part of her screamed against it. Smith's hand touched her shoulder. Gentle. Apologetic. Devastating. "Please," he whispered, too low for anyone else to hear. "Don't make this worse." She looked up at him then, really looked, and saw the truth written in his storm-gray eyes. He didn't want this. But he'd do it anyway. Duty before desire. Pack before person. She knelt. The stone was cold beneath her knees. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting her in colors that felt like mockery. Red for bloodshed. Blue for sorrow. Gold for the power she'd never possess. The chains clinked as she settled into position. And then something changed. The sunlight hit the iron around her wrists, and the metal warmed. Not hot enough to burn, but enough to notice. Enough to make her breath catch. The air around her trembled. Just slightly. Like heat rising off summer stones. Torin began the ritual incantation, his voice echoing off ancient walls. The runes on the altar floor began to glow brighter, responding to his words. Magic older than memory stirred in the cathedral's bones. Bertie felt it. Felt something else too. A flicker deep inside her chest, in a place she'd always assumed was empty. Where a wolf should have been. Where power should have lived. The chains warmed more. The air bent. Whispers started at the back of the crowd. Nervous. Fearful. Cursed, someone muttered. Unnatural, another agreed. She'll poison the pack. Smith's wolf rumbled with warning, silencing them. But his eyes never left Bertie, and in them she saw confusion. Concern. The beginning of terrible understanding. Torin raised his hands, ready to speak the binding words that would seal her fate. Bertie closed her eyes and felt tears slip down her cheeks. She'd failed. Lost. Surrendered. But inside her chest, where emptiness had always lived, something ancient was beginning to wake. And it was not a wolf. Elder Torin's voice filled the cathedral like thunder rolling across mountains. "We gather beneath the blessed moon to witness the binding of Alpha Smith Jones and Bertie Krause. Their union shall strengthen the pack's blood and honor the moon's decree." The words were ancient, spoken in the old tongue that made Bertie's bones ache. Around the altar, the carved runes began to glow, pale blue at first, then deepening to silver. The magic responded to Torin's call, centuries of power waking from dormant stone. Smith stood beside her, close enough that she could feel heat radiating from his body. His black wolf paced beneath his skin, restless and wrong. The mate bond between them pulled taut, vibrating like a string about to snap. "Alpha Smith Jones," Torin intoned, "do you accept this female as your Luna, to lead beside you, to bear your bloodline, to serve Ironfang until death claims you both?" Smith's jaw clenched. His gray eyes flickered to Bertie's face for just a moment, long enough for her to see the war raging behind them. Duty. Desire. Resentment. Fear. "I accept," he said. The words sounded like surrender. Torin turned to Bertie. His expression held nothing but cold judgment. "Bertie Krause, do you accept Alpha Smith Jones as your mate, to honor him, to submit to his will, to serve Ironfang until death claims you both?" The chains around her wrists suddenly grew hot. Birdie gasped. The heat spread up her arms, not burning but blazing with energy that had nowhere to go. She looked down and saw what no one else could see yet, a faint glow pulsing beneath the iron, following the rhythm of her panicked heartbeat. Her voice cracked. She couldn't say the words. Couldn't force the lie past her lips. She accepts, Torin said for her, his tone brooking no argument. The runes on the floor flared brighter in response. The binding magic reached for them both, ready to seal vows that should have been willing. That's when everything went wrong. The chains around Birdie's wrists erupted with light, no longer faint, but brilliant, searing, impossible to ignore. Golden light poured from the iron like liquid sunlight, spilling across the stone floor in patterns that had nothing to do with the moon's runes. The cathedral went silent. Then someone screamed. A wolf near the back of the crowd tried to shift, responding to the surge of magic in the air. But halfway through the transformation, his body seized. He collapsed, caught between forms, writhing on the ground. Another wolf dropped to her knees, clutching her head. Something's wrong. I can't feel the moon. Panic rippled through the pack like wildfire. 3 more wolves attempted to shift and failed, their bodies rejecting the transformation. One of them vomited blood. Another's eyes rolled back as she fainted. What is this? Someone shouted. She's cursed. Abomination. Elder Torin staggered backward, his face gone pale. The binding magic, it's rejecting her. She's poison to the pack bond. Smith moved before Birdie could process what was happening. He stepped between her and the crowd, his body a wall of muscle and barely controlled fury. His wolf surged so close to the surface that his eyes flickered gold. Stand down, he commanded, and the alpha authority in his voice hit like a physical blow. Wolves who'd been advancing stopped mid-step. Everyone stand down. But Torin wasn't intimidated. The elder pointed a shaking finger at Birdie. She is tainted. Her presence disrupts the very magic that sustains us. You must remove her from the cathedral before. Before what? Smith's voice dropped to something dangerous. Before you admit the council pushed this ceremony knowing it would fail. Torin's expression shuddered. You dare accuse. I dare question why no one bothered to test compatibility. Why you rushed this binding despite every sign that something was wrong. Why you care more about political optics than pack safety. Another elder stepped forward, Morel, ancient and bitter. The alpha defends his cursed mate over his pack. Already she corrupts his judgment. She corrupts nothing, Smith snarled. But even as he said it, Birdie felt something terrible building inside her chest. The warmth that had started in her wrists now spread through her entire body, racing along pathways she'd never known existed. Her vision blurred. The cathedral seemed to tilt. Morel raised her staff. If you will not remove the poison, Alpha, we will do it for you. She brought the staff down toward Birdie's head. Smith caught it mid-swing. The wood cracked in his grip, splintering. Touch her, he said quietly, and I'll rip your throat out. Smith. Torin's voice cut through the chaos. Complete the binding. Speak the words. Perhaps sealing the bond will stabilize whatever dark magic she carries. Smith looked at Birdie. She saw the calculation in his eyes, the desperate hope that maybe, somehow, this could be fixed. Forgive me, he whispered. Then louder, for the magic and the pack and the moon to hear, I name you Luna. Birdie Kraus, you are bound to me, bound to Ironfang, bound until death breaks what I have sealed. The cathedral exploded with light. The runes didn't just glow, they blazed. Brilliant, blinding, wrong. The pale blue of moon magic twisted into gold, into white, into colors that shouldn't exist. The floor beneath them cracked with a sound like breaking bones. Bertie screamed. It wasn't pain exactly. It was too big for pain. It felt like something inside her was being ripped open, exposed, forced into existence. She saw things that couldn't be real, a void filled with stars, constellations she didn't recognize, light that predated sun and moon both. Ancient words echoed in her head, spoken in a language she'd never learned but somehow understood. Daughter of stars. Child of the first light. You were never meant to kneel. The vision lasted a fraction of a second. Then everything went black. The last thing Bertie heard before consciousness fled was Smith's voice, raw with something that might have been fear. Bertie. Bertie, stay with me. The last thing she felt was the mate bond twisting violently inside her chest, reforming into something that hurt them both. Then nothing. When Bertie woke, she was in darkness. Not the comfortable darkness of closed eyes or nighttime. This was absolute. Suffocating. The kind of dark that swallowed sound and hope together. She tried to move and heard the familiar clink of chains. Her wrists were still bound. The iron felt heavier now, colder, like it was draining something vital from her veins. She was lying on stone, a floor, she realized, not a bed. The air smelled of damp and earth and something older. Familiar, but not home. A cell. They'd put her in a cell. Bertie pushed herself upright, chains rattling. Her head pounded. Her body ached in places that had nothing to do with physical injury. The thing that had woken in the cathedral was quiet now, dormant again, but she could feel it. A presence where emptiness used to be. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Torchlight flickered beneath a door she hadn't noticed. A key turned in a lock. Smith stepped inside. He looked like he'd aged years in however long she'd been unconscious. His hair was disheveled. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. Blood stained his shirt, not his own, she thought. They stared at each other in the dim light. What am I? Bertie's voice came out hoarse, broken. Smith closed his eyes. When he opened them again, she saw fear. Raw, undisguised fear. I don't know, he said. But the council wants you dead. And I might be the only thing standing between you and execution. The door closed behind him with a sound like a coffin sealing shut. Bertie looked down at her chained wrists and saw the faintest trace of golden light still pulsing beneath the iron. Whatever she was becoming, it had only just begun. Drop a comment if you're Team Bertie or Team Smith, and tell me what you think is waking inside her. Is it a curse or something more? Subscribe so you don't miss what happens when the council comes for her next. This story is just getting started, and trust me, you won't want to miss the moment Bertie discovers exactly what kind of power lives beneath her skin. They didn't call it a prison. They called it protective custody. The Luna's temporary quarters. A place for her to recover from the ceremony's disruption. But Bertie knew a cage when she lived in one. The room was larger than her previous chamber, she'd give them that. Stone walls softened by tapestries depicting Ironfang's glorious history, battles won, enemies conquered, alphas crowned beneath full moons. A bed with furs piled thick enough to drown in. A window, though it was barred with iron and overlooked nothing but the training grounds where wolves sparred from dawn to dusk. And guards. Always guards. 2 stationed outside her door. Another patrolling the corridor. She heard their footsteps at all hours, steady as a heartbeat, reminding her that she was watched. Contained. Controlled. The chains had been removed from her wrists after the first night, leaving behind raw, angry marks that didn't quite heal right. But she wasn't free. Freedom required more than the absence of iron. 3 days had passed since the ceremony. 3 days of meals delivered by silent servants who wouldn't meet her eyes. 3 days of council members whispering in corridors just loud enough for her to hear. 3 days of watching the pack through her barred window, seeing the way they moved around the fortress with purpose while she sat trapped like a specimen under glass. This wasn't how Lunas lived. Birdie had seen Luna Margrave from the Silver Ridge pack when she visited last spring. The woman had moved through Ironfang like royalty, draped in ceremonial furs, flanked by attendants, treated with deference and respect. She'd sat beside her alpha at the high table, offered counsel during negotiations, commanded her own guard. She'd been a partner. An equal. Birdie was a problem to be managed. The door opened without warning on the 4th morning. She'd learned not to expect courtesy knocks. Smith stepped inside, and the guards closed the door behind him. He looked tired. The kind of exhaustion that went bone deep, that came from fighting battles on too many fronts. His dark hair was pulled back carelessly. He'd foregone the ceremonial armor he'd worn at the ceremony for simple leather and linen. Almost like he was trying to appear less threatening. It didn't work. Smith Jones radiated danger the way fire radiated heat. Birdie. Her name came out rough, like he'd been practicing what to say and forgotten the script. She didn't respond. Just watched him from where she sat on the window ledge, her back against the bars, arms wrapped around her knees. Smith moved further into the room, and she noticed he left the door within reach. Escape route or trap, she couldn't tell. "How are you feeling?" he asked. The question was so absurd she almost laughed. "How do you think I'm feeling?" His jaw tightened. "The healers said you're recovering well. No lasting damage from the ceremony." "No lasting damage," she repeated flatly. "Except for the part where I'm locked in a room like a criminal. Except for the part where your entire pack thinks I'm cursed. Except for the part where you dragged me back in chains and forced me into a bond one never wanted. The bond was fated. The bond was your excuse." Birdie stood, anger finally overriding caution. "You could have refused the moon's decree. Other alphas have. You could have fought the council. Instead, you chose the easy path. You chose duty over everything else, and now you want me to what? Thank you for not killing me." Smith's eyes flashed gold. His wolf pressing close to the surface. "You think this was easy? You think I wanted any of this? I think you're a coward." The word hung in the air between them like a blade. Smith crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. Not threatening exactly, but overwhelming. He stopped just close enough for her to feel the heat of him, to see the storm raging in his gray eyes. "I am trying to keep you alive," he said through clenched teeth. "The council wants you executed. Half the pack thinks you're an abomination. The other half is too terrified to speak up. I am the only thing standing between you and a death sentence, so forgive me if I'm not apologizing for saving your life." "You call this saved?" Birdie's voice shook. "You call being caged and chained and feared being saved?" "Yes." The word came out broken. "Because you're breathing. Because you're here. Because I can protect you as long as you're bound to me. I don't want your protection. I want my freedom. Then you want to die." Smith's hand moved before he could stop it, reaching for hers. "Because that's what freedom means for you now. The moment you leave Ironfang's protection." His fingers brushed her wrist. The mate bond erupted. It wasn't the gentle pull she'd felt before. This was violent, searing, wrong. Fire raced up her arm, through her chest, and slammed into that place where something ancient lived. Smith jerked backward with a sharp inhale, his hand smoking faintly where their skin had touched. They stared at each other, both breathing hard. "What?" Smith looked at his hand. The skin was red, blistered. "What are you?" Birdie had no answer. She felt the power settling back down inside her, coiling tight. Waiting. Smith backed toward the door. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely afraid. Not of danger. Of her. "I'll send the healers," he said quietly. Then he was gone. Birdie sank back onto the window ledge, her whole body shaking. She looked at her hands, the same hands that had just burned an alpha through the mate bond itself, and saw the faintest trace of golden light dancing beneath her skin. The rumors started before sunset. She heard them through the window, through the walls, carried on the voices of passing wolves. "Did you hear? The Luna burned the alpha with a touch. Unnatural. The bond itself rejects her. She's poisoning him. Corrupting his wolf. The council should have executed her when they had the chance." Birdie pressed her forehead against the cold iron bars and closed her eyes. 2 days later, Smith returned. This time he brought his black wolf. The massive creature padded into the room ahead of him, and Birdie's first instinct was to scramble backward. The wolf was even more terrifying up close, easily twice her size, eyes burning like captured stars, presence heavy enough to make the air itself feel dense. But the wolf didn't attack. It approached slowly, head lowered, and did something that made Birdie's breath catch. It bowed. Not the aggressive dominance display wolves used to assert hierarchy. This was reverent. Almost worshipful. The creature pressed its massive head to the floor at her feet and whined softly. Smith, back in human form, stared at his own wolf like he'd never seen it before. "He's never done that," he said quietly. "Not for anyone. Not even me." Birdie reached out hesitantly, and the wolf lifted its head just enough to press its nose to her palm. The touch didn't burn. Didn't hurt. The wolf's eyes closed with something that looked like relief. "What does it mean?" she whispered. Smith shook his head. "I don't know. But he recognizes you as something. Something more than Luna. More than wolf." The black wolf settled beside her feet like a guardian, and Smith couldn't seem to look away from the sight. "The council is meeting tomorrow," he said finally. "They're voting on whether to keep you confined. Whether to," he stopped, jaw working. "Whether stronger measures are necessary." "Stronger measures," Birdie repeated hollowly. "You mean killing me?" "I won't let them. You might not have a choice." Smith met her eyes. "Then I'll make one." After he left, Birdie sat in the fading light and noticed something new. The air around her wasn't empty. There were threads in it. Faint strands of light that connected everything, the stones in the walls, the bars on the window, the guards outside her door. Silver threads for the wolves, following the pack bonds. Blue threads for the moon's magic that saturated Ironfang. And golden threads that led nowhere she recognized. Threads that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. She reached out and touched one experimentally. It hummed beneath her fingers like a living thing. She was seeing something no wolf could see. Understanding magic that predated the packs themselves. A knock at the door made her jerk her hand back. A guard entered, his face carefully blank. "The council has issued new orders. You're to remain confined until further notice. The Alpha is forbidden from visiting without council supervision." He placed a heavier set of chains on the table. Iron reinforced with silver. The kind that burned shifters. "For the safety of the pack," he said, not meeting her eyes. The door locked behind him with a finality that echoed through her bones. Birdie looked at the chains, then at her hands where golden light still flickered beneath the skin. They thought chains would hold her. They thought iron and silver and fear would contain whatever was waking inside her. But she was beginning to understand the truth. She wasn't cursed. She was something the moon herself had no name for. And chains were only metal. They came for her at dawn. Not Smith. Not healers. The council themselves, flanked by 6 guards wearing silver-laced armor that marked them as executioners in all but name. Elder Torin led them, his face carved from judgment and certainty. Elder Morel followed, her staff clicking against stone with each step. 4 others Birdie recognized from the ceremony, the ones who'd called her cursed, who'd whispered poison while she knelt in chains. On your feet, Torin commanded. Birdie stood slowly from her bed, her heart already racing. The guards fanned out, blocking the door and window. No escape this time. You will come with us to the judgment chamber, Morel said. The council has questions. You will answer them truthfully, or you will face consequences. What questions? Birdie's voice came out steadier than she felt. Questions about your nature. Your bloodline. The corruption you've brought into this pack. Torin's eyes were cold as winter stone. Questions about whether you deserve to continue breathing our air. They didn't chain her this time. They didn't need to. The guards surrounded her close enough that she could smell the silver on their blades, feel the threat radiating from their bodies. The judgment chamber was deep in the fortress, carved from rock that predated Ironfang itself. No windows. No natural light. Just torches burning in iron sconces and runes covering every surface, containment runes, she realized. Magic designed to suppress shifter abilities. They forced her into a chair at the room's center. The guards took positions at each cardinal point. The council arranged themselves in a semicircle before her, a tribunal of condemnation. State your full name, Torin began. You know my name. State it. Birdie Kraus. Your mother's name. Ilara Kraus. Your father's name. Birdie hesitated. I don't know. My mother never told me. Morel leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Convenient. A fatherless child. No bloodline to trace. No pack history to verify. She looked at the other elders. The corruption could come from anywhere. I'm not corrupted. Silence. Torin's voice cracked like a whip. You will speak only when directly questioned. Do you understand? Birdie's hands clenched in her lap. She felt the power stirring inside her, responding to her fear. Not yet, she told it. Not yet. When did you first notice your abnormality? Morel asked. I don't know what you mean. Your lack of wolf. When did you realize you were defective? The word hit like a slap. Birdie had been called many things, weak, useless, worthless. But defective carried a weight that made her throat tight. I was 7, she said quietly. My first shift was supposed to come. It didn't. And you felt nothing? No wolf presence at all? Nothing. Liar. Morel slammed her staff against stone. No child of wolf blood feels nothing. You felt something. Something unnatural. Something other. I felt empty, Birdie said, the old shame rising. I felt broken. Because you are broken. Torin circled her chair slowly. Broken or deliberately corrupted? Tell us, Birdie Kraus, did your mother make deals with dark powers? Did she trade your wolf for something else? My mother was a healer. Your mother was a stranger who appeared at our borders 17 years ago with a child in her arms and no explanation. Torin stopped directly behind her. She claimed sanctuary. We granted it. And now her daughter poisons our alpha and disrupts our sacred magic. Birdie's breath came faster. The power inside her chest coiled tighter, pressing against her ribs like something trying to break free. I'm not poisoning anyone. Then explain the ceremony. Explain why pack wolves collapsed when you were named Luna. Explain why the Alpha burns when he touches you. Explain why moon magic fails in your presence. I can't. Because you are corrupted. Tainted. An abomination wearing a girl's face. That's not true. Prove it. Morel gestured to one of the guards. Shift. Show us your wolf. If you are truly one of us, if you are truly fit to be Luna, prove it now. I can't shift. You know I can't. Then you are useless. Worse than useless. You are a cancer growing in Ironfang's heart. Torin leaned down, his mouth close to her ear. Tell us what you are, girl. Tell us the truth before we cut it out of you. The guards moved closer. Silver blades gleamed in torchlight. Something inside Birdie snapped. I don't know what I am. The words tore out of her, raw and desperate. I don't know why I'm like this. I don't know why the magic reacts to me. I just want to be left alone. I just want. You want to destroy us. Morel raised her staff. You want to corrupt the Alpha, fracture the pack, break the moon's covenant. But we will not allow it. The council has voted. You will be executed at sunset. No. The word came from somewhere deeper than Birdie's throat. Deeper than her lungs. It came from that place inside her where light lived, where something ancient had been sleeping, waiting. The power exploded outward. Not fire. Not lightning. Light. Pure, searing, celestial light that had nothing to do with moon or sun or any earthly thing. It erupted from Birdie's body in a wave that turned the judgment chamber into a supernova. The windows shattered. Glass exploded outward in a storm of glittering shards. The containment runes didn't just fail, they detonated. Stone cracked. The carved symbols exploded into dust and smoke. The elders screamed. Torin flew backward, slammed into the wall, and crumpled unconscious. Morel's staff shattered in her hands before she collapsed. The other council members dropped like puppets with cut strings. The guards tried to advance. The light hit them like a physical force, driving them to their knees. Only one figure didn't fall. Smith's black wolf materialized in the doorway, drawn by the surge of power. The massive creature should have attacked. Should have defended the pack from whatever threat had erupted in their stronghold. Instead, it walked calmly through the chaos, stepped over unconscious elders, and bowed its great head at Birdie's feet. The light faded as quickly as it had come. Birdie collapsed forward, gasping, her whole body shaking. She looked at her hands and saw them glowing, veins visible beneath the skin like golden rivers. Footsteps pounded in the corridor. Smith burst through the door in human form, taking in the scene with wild eyes, the destroyed chamber, the unconscious council, his wolf prostrate before the girl they'd called corrupted. What happened? His voice was hoarse. Birdie, what did you do? She couldn't answer. Couldn't form words. The remaining guards regained their feet, weapons raised. The abomination has attacked the council. Alpha, we must. Stand down. Smith's command was absolute. But Alpha. I said stand down. He moved between Birdie and the guards, his body a shield. Lower your weapons. Now. The council gave orders. The council is unconscious. I am Alpha. You answer to me. Smith's eyes blazed gold. His wolf's dominance flooded the room, forcing the guards to submit despite their silver armor. Get the healers. Tend to the elders. And if anyone touches her, I will tear their throat out personally. The guards hesitated, then fled. Smith turned to Birdie. She expected anger. Fear. Instead, she saw something that looked like terrible understanding dawning. "You're not cursed," he said quietly. "Smith." The council knew. They had to have known. He looked at the shattered runes, the destroyed containment magic. They were trying to suppress something. Testing you. Pushing you until I broke, Birdie finished. Until you showed them what you really are. Behind him, Elder Morel stirred with a groan. Her eyes opened, fixed on Birdie with pure hatred. "Heretic," she rasped. "Traitor." "And you," she looked at Smith. "The Alpha defends her. The mate bond has corrupted him. He's lost to us. Then I'm lost." Smith's voice was steel. "If choosing her makes me a traitor, then I'm a traitor." The words hung in the air like a vow. Morel laughed, the sound wet and broken. "You've doomed us all. The moon will judge you both." Smith pulled Birdie to her feet. "Let her try." As they left the judgment chamber, Birdie felt it, memories that weren't hers flooding through her mind. Visions of stars and void and ancient light. Words in a language she shouldn't understand echoing in her skull. "I was never meant to have a wolf," she whispered. Smith looked at her, and for the first time, she saw him truly see her. Not as Luna. Not as mate. But as something other. Something more. "Then what were you meant to have?" he asked. Birdie looked at her hands where golden light still pulsed beneath the skin. "Everything else." Drop a comment if you think Birdie is becoming something the pack should fear or if the council has been lying all along. Subscribe to find out what happens when Smith discovers the truth about what the council has been hiding, and why Birdie's mother really came to Ironfang 17 years ago. The truth is darker than either of them imagined. The fortress slept, but Birdie was wide awake. 3 nights had passed since the judgment chamber exploded. 3 nights of being confined to new quarters, not the cell from before, but not freedom either. Smith had insisted she be moved somewhere more secure after the council's interrogation. Somewhere he could protect her. But tonight, protection wasn't what she needed. She needed answers. The golden threads she'd been seeing had grown stronger, more defined. They wove through the fortress like a map only she could read, connecting rooms and corridors, pulsing with different energies. Some threads were pack bonds, silver and steady. Others were moon magic, pale blue and cold. But one thread was different. Ancient. Hidden. It led down. Birdie waited until the guard rotation shifted, then slipped from her room wearing a cloak she'd borrowed from Smith. The fabric still smelled like him, pine and smoke and something wild. The mate bond hummed softly in her chest, aware of his nearness even though he slept 2 floors above. She followed the golden thread through corridors she'd never walked, past chambers that hadn't been opened in years. The air grew colder as she descended. Damper. The stone walls here predated the fortress itself, carved from bedrock by hands that knew older magic. The restricted archives. She'd heard whispers about them. Every pack had forbidden records, histories too dangerous to share, prophecies too dark to speak aloud, truths that could shatter the carefully constructed present. The door was sealed with runes. Containment magic, just like the judgment chamber. But Birdie could see the threads now, see how the magic wove itself into locks and barriers. She reached out and touched the golden thread. The runes flickered. Hesitated. Then unwound like ribbon pulled from a gift. The door opened. Inside, the archive stretched farther than should have been possible. Shelves carved into stone walls held scrolls and books and tablets marked with symbols she didn't recognize. The air tasted of dust and secrets and time itself. The golden thread led her deeper, past histories of pack wars and treaties, past bloodline records and ceremonial texts. It stopped at the back of the archives, before a section sealed behind iron bars. A single book sat on a pedestal beyond the bars. Its cover was black as void, marked with constellations that shifted when she looked at them. No title. No author. Just stars that moved like living things. Birdie touched the bars and they dissolved like smoke. Her hands shook as she opened the book. The pages were written in a language she shouldn't understand, but the words bloomed in her mind as if she'd always known them. The Starborn prophecy. She read. And with each line, her world reformed. The Starborn were the first children of magic, born from the void between stars. They commanded light itself, bending reality, shaping existence. They were gods in mortal form, walking the earth before wolves, before the moon rose to grant her gift. But power without balance breeds chaos. The Starborn grew arrogant. They reshaped the world according to their whims, caring nothing for the creatures who shared their existence. So the cosmos answered their cruelty with judgment. The moon rose. She offered wolves a gift, the ability to shift, to survive, to thrive under her light. But the gift came with a price, a covenant. The wolves would serve the moon. And in return, she would suppress the Starborn, drive them to extinction, ensure their power never threatened the world again. The pact was sealed in blood and starlight. For millennia, it held. The Starborn faded. Their bloodlines diluted, their power forgotten, their very existence reduced to myth. Until Birdie. The last daughter will be born without wolf, marked by moon but claimed by stars. She will break the covenant. She will choose whether wolves keep their gift or return to what they were before the moon's mercy. Her awakening will herald the end of an age. Birdie's breath caught. She kept reading. The Council of Ironfang will know her bloodline. They will fear her awakening. They will orchestrate her death to preserve the covenant. Her mother's face flashed through her memory, kind eyes, gentle hands, the way she'd looked at Birdie in those final days before the fever took her. Not sick. Afraid. They poisoned you, Birdie whispered to the ghost of her mother. And you knew they would. A sound behind her made Birdie spin. Smith stood in the doorway, chest heaving like he'd run the entire way. His wolf burned in his eyes, agitated and fierce. I felt you leave through the bond, he said. What are you doing down here? Birdie held up the book. Learning the truth you were never supposed to know. Smith approached slowly, his gaze moving from her to the book to the dissolved bars. How did you get past the containment runes? They weren't meant to contain me. They were meant to hide this. She turned the book so he could see the pages. The council knew what I was. They knew what would happen if I awakened. And they tried to kill me before I could. Smith read over her shoulder, his expression darkening with each line. When he finished, he looked at her with something between awe and horror. You're going to break the moon's covenant. I don't know if I can control it. The prophecy says my awakening is inevitable. Then the council will try to kill you again. For real this time. Smith's jaw clenched. I have to confront them. Make them answer for what they've done. Smith, no. But he was already moving, the book in his hands, fury radiating from every step. Birdie ran after him. They found the council in the war room, gathered around maps and documents, planning something in low voices that stopped the moment Smith kicked the door open. You murdered her mother, Smith said, his voice deadly calm. He threw the book onto their table. You poisoned Alara Kraus because you knew what her daughter was. What she would become. Torin didn't even blink. We did what was necessary. Necessary? Smith's wolf surged forward. You killed an innocent woman. You tried to kill Birdie. You manipulated everything. To save the packs. Morel stood, slamming her hand on the table. That girl is a weapon. If she ascends fully, every wolf in existence could lose their gift. Thousands would be rendered powerless. Packs would fall. Territories would collapse into chaos. We would return to being prey instead of predators. So you decided her life was worth less than your power. We decided the many outweigh the one. Torin's eyes were cold. As you should have decided when the moon named her. But you're too weak. Too corrupted by a bond that should never have formed. Smith moved toward Torin with lethal intent. The other council members rose as one. 3 of them shifted instantly, wolves blocking his path. The others drew blades, silver, meant to hurt alphas, meant to kill. Stand down, Smith Jones, Torin commanded. You have no authority here anymore. You're just another wolf. And wolves who threaten the council don't live long. The wolves attacked. Smith shifted mid-leap, his massive black wolf meeting them with savage fury. Blood sprayed. Snarls echoed. Bodies collided with brutal force. But it was 3 against 1, and they'd planned for this. Silver chains erupted from concealed positions, wrapping around Smith's wolf, burning through fur and flesh. He howled with rage and pain, trying to break free. The council wolves pressed their advantage, teeth finding purchase, claws raking across his sides. Stop! Birdie screamed. No one listened. Torin approached Smith's struggling form with a silver blade. You chose wrong, boy. Just like your father before you. He raised the blade. Birdie didn't think. She reached for the power inside her chest and pulled. Astral energy erupted from her hands in a controlled beam of golden light. Not an explosion this time. Focused. Precise. Devastating. The light struck Torin's blade and melted it to slag. It swept across the room, severing the silver chains binding Smith, throwing the council wolves backward with force that cracked their bones. The council members still in human form scrambled away, terror written across their faces. Birdie walked forward, and where her feet touched the ground, golden light bloomed like flowers made of stars. The air around her shimmered. Gravity itself seemed uncertain in her presence. You will not touch him, she said, and her voice carried harmonics that made the stone walls tremble. Smith shifted back to human form, blood streaming from a dozen wounds. He looked at her with something like reverence. Birdie. I'm done running. Done hiding. Done letting them tell me what I am. She looked at the council, at the fear in their eyes. You wanted to know what happens when you chain a star. You're about to find out. Torin backed away. You'll destroy us all. No. Smith stepped beside Birdie despite his injuries. She'll free us all. From your manipulation. Your fear. Your obsession with control. He did something Birdie never expected. He knelt. Not in submission. Not in defeat. But in acknowledgement. In apology. I dragged you back in chains, he said quietly. I forced you into a bond you didn't want. I chose duty over protecting you when protection was what you needed most. He looked up at her with storm-gray eyes that held nothing but truth. I was wrong. And I'm sorry. Birdie felt something shift in her chest. The mate bond reformed, no longer forced or painful. It became something chosen. Something equal. She reached down and helped him to his feet. We're leaving, she told the council. Both of us. Tonight. And if you try to stop us. The fortress trembled. Not from Birdie's power. From something else. The moon magic that saturated Ironfang began to flicker. Runes carved into walls dimmed. Pack bonds wavered. Wolves throughout the fortress cried out as their connection to the moon stuttered and failed. The awakening had begun. And nothing would ever be the same. The council convened at midnight, 3 days after the judgment chamber exploded. Smith stood before them in the great hall, flanked by guards who wouldn't meet his eyes. The entire pack had been summoned to witness what everyone knew was coming. Warriors lined the walls. Families crowded the balconies. Even the children were there, watching with wide eyes as their alpha faced judgment. Birdie stood at the back, wrists bound with silver-laced rope, 2 guards holding her arms. They'd insisted on the restraints after what happened in the chamber. She didn't fight them. Didn't need to. The power inside her had grown quieter since the explosion, like it was waiting for something. Elder Torin stood at the center of the council's table, his face still bearing bruises from when he'd been thrown against the wall. Elder Morel sat beside him, one arm in a sling, her expression carved from pure hatred. Alpha Smith Jones, Torin's voice echoed through the hall. You stand accused of betraying your pack, your bloodline, and the moon herself. How do you answer? Smith's jaw tightened. I answer that I have done what any alpha would do. I protected my mate. Your mate is an abomination. Morel slammed her good hand on the table. She destroyed our sacred chamber. She attacked the council. She corrupts everything she touches, including you. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some voices rose in agreement. Others whispered dissent. She defended herself, Smith said, his voice carrying steel. Against a council that decided her fate before giving her a chance to speak. Against elders who wanted her dead from the moment the moon named her. The moon made a mistake, another elder said. Or she was testing us. Testing whether we were strong enough to reject corruption when we saw it. The moon doesn't make mistakes. Smith's eyes blazed gold. And neither do I. Birdie is my mate. My Luna. And I will not let you execute her because you're afraid of what you don't understand. Torin stood slowly. Then you leave us no choice. The council calls for a vote of no confidence. All those who believe Alpha Smith Jones is unfit to lead due to tainted judgment, corrupted mate bond, and betrayal of pack law, signify. 6 hands rose. 6 out of 7 elders. The silence that followed was deafening. The vote is cast, Torin said. Smith Jones, you are hereby stripped of your title as Alpha of Ironfang. You will relinquish all authority, all privileges, all protections afforded to pack leadership. Do you accept the council's judgment? Smith looked at the elders. Then at the pack. Warriors he'd trained with. Families he'd protected. Children he'd helped raise. He'd spent his entire life serving them. Bleeding for them. Becoming exactly what they needed. And now they were taking it all away because he'd chosen one girl over their fear. I accept, Smith said quietly. Gasps filled the hall. Birdie's heart slammed against her ribs. She tried to step forward, but the guards held her fast. Smith, no. I accept, he repeated, louder this time. Not because I agree with your judgment. But because I will not lead a pack that would rather destroy an innocent girl than face their own ignorance. If choosing her makes me unfit, then I was never the alpha you deserved. He unbuckled his ceremonial belt, the one bearing Ironfang's crest, passed down through generations of alphas. He placed it on the table before the council. But know this, Smith continued, his voice dropping to something dangerous. When the truth comes out, and it will come out, you'll realize what you've done. What you've destroyed. And by then, it will be too late. Torin picked up the belt with something like satisfaction. You're dismissed. Take your corrupted mate and leave Ironfang by dawn. If either of you are found on pack lands after sunrise, you will be executed on sight. Smith turned to leave. The crowd parted before him like water before stone. That's when Birdie felt it. The power inside her chest surged, responding not to fear this time, but to rage. Smith was losing everything because of her. Because the council was too blind, too afraid, too desperate to maintain control to see the truth. She wouldn't let them take him down for protecting her. No, Birdie said. Everyone turned. She looked at her guards. Let me go. They glanced at each other, uncertain. The silver rope burned her wrists, but she barely felt it anymore. The power was rising, golden light seeping through her skin, making the bindings glow. Let me go, she repeated. Or I'll make you. The guards released her and stepped back quickly. Birdie walked forward through the crowd. Wolves moved aside, some from fear, others from something that looked like awe. She didn't stop until she stood before the council's table, facing the elders who tried to break her. You want to know what I am? Her voice carried through the hall. You want to understand why moon magic fails around me? Why I have no wolf? Why I can do things that terrify you? Silence, abomination, Morel hissed. No. Golden light flickered around Birdie's hands. I'm done being silent. I'm done letting you tell me what I am. You've been lying to yourselves and to this pack since the moment my mother brought me here. Torrens' expression shuddered. Your mother was given sanctuary. My mother was running from something. And you knew it. You've always known it. Birdie felt memories that weren't hers flooding back, fragments of conversation, midnight meetings, her mother begging the council to keep her secret. She told you what I was. What bloodline I carried. And you let me grow up thinking I was broken because you were too afraid to admit the truth. The crowd was silent now. Every eye fixed on her. What truth? Someone called out. Birdie looked at her hands where light pulsed beneath the skin. That I was never meant to be a wolf. That my blood comes from something older. Something that existed before the first packs. Before the moon herself granted shifting magic. Heresy, Morel breathed. History, Birdie countered. She turned to face the crowd. The Starborn. That's what my mother's people were called. They commanded astral power, light from the void itself. They were the first magic in this world. And when the moon rose and granted wolves the gift of shifting, the Starborn faded. Everyone thought they were extinct. She held up her wrists, still marked with rope burns. But extinction and hiding are not the same thing. The silver rope fell away, dissolving into ash. The crowd gasped. Torrens stood, face pale. How do you know this? Because I've been dreaming it. Remembering it. Ever since the ceremony unlocked something inside me. Birdie's voice shook but held strong. And I know something else. I know you orchestrated my mother's death. The accusation landed like lightning. She died of fever, Torrens started. She died 3 months after the prophecy named me as Smith's mate. Convenient timing. Birdie's eyes blazed. You poisoned her. Slowly. Because you thought if she was gone, I'd have no one to teach me what I was. You thought I'd die ignorant and weak, and the prophecy would fail. Morel's face confirmed what Birdie already knew. We did what was necessary to protect the pack. You did what was necessary to protect your power. Smith's voice cut through the tension. He moved to stand beside Birdie. You knew she was Starborn. You knew what that meant. And instead of helping her, guiding her, you tried to suppress it. Control it. Kill it. Because Starborn power threatens the moon's covenant. Torrens' composure cracked. The ancient texts say that if Starborn magic awakens fully, it will break the pact that gives wolves their gift. The entire shifter world could lose their wolves. The hall erupted. Shouts of fear. Demands for answers. Parents clutching children. Birdie felt the power surge higher, responding to the chaos. Stars flickered at the edges of her vision. The air around her began to shimmer, bending light in ways that shouldn't be possible. Then maybe the pact needs to be broken, she said quietly. The words silenced everyone. Maybe a covenant built on suppressing entire bloodlines, on sacrificing innocent people to maintain power, isn't worth keeping. You would doom us all, Morel seethed. Thousands of wolves would lose their gift. Entire packs would fall. Or maybe they'd learn to survive without depending on magic that was never theirs to begin with. Birdie's feet lifted slightly off the ground. She didn't notice. The power was taking over, and she couldn't stop it anymore. Didn't want to. Constellations began appearing around her head like a crown. Stars that existed in no earthly sky. The pack backed away. Some in terror. Others in wonder. Smith reached for her hand. Birdie. Don't. She looked at him, and her eyes were no longer human. They glowed with the light of distant galaxies. Don't try to stop this. I can't control it anymore. I'm not trying to stop you. Smith's hand closed around hers despite the heat. Despite the power that made his palm blister. I'm trying to stand with you. The mate bond flared between them, and this time it didn't hurt. It transformed. The silver thread that had connected them twisted into gold, into something beyond moon magic, beyond pack bonds. The council was right about one thing, Smith said. We are dangerous together. Torin pulled a ceremonial blade. Then we end this now. Kill them both. Before she ascends fully. Before she destroys everything our ancestors built. The elders moved forward. Warriors hesitated, caught between orders and instinct. Birdie's power exploded outward in a wave that shook the fortress to its foundations. Try, she said, and her voice echoed with harmonics that predated language itself. And I will show you what happens when you chain a star. What happens next will change everything. Drop a comment if you think the council deserves what's coming, and subscribe so you don't miss the final chapter where Birdie becomes what she was always meant to be, and Smith makes a choice that will either save them both or destroy them forever. The cathedral doors opened before Birdie touched them. She walked through alone, Smith waiting outside at her request. This was something she needed to do herself. Return to the place where she'd been dragged in chains, where she'd knelt in humiliation, where everything had started to break. This time, she walked in power. The cathedral was empty. Or so it seemed. But Birdie could see the threads now, dozens of them, converging in the shadows. The council had gathered here. Waiting. Planning one final attempt to stop what they couldn't control. Her footsteps echoed on stone still cracked from the ceremony. Sunlight streamed through the broken windows she'd shattered, painting everything in fractured colors. Astral energy trailed behind her like a cloak made of starlight. Shadows bent around her steps, unsure how to exist in the presence of something that predated darkness itself. We knew you'd come here, Torin's voice echoed from the altar. He stepped into view, flanked by the remaining council members. All of them armed. All of them desperate. Back to where it started. Where it will end. Birdie stopped in the center of the cathedral, exactly where she'd knelt before. You're right, she said. This is where it ends. Your lies. Your manipulation. Your fear. Morel emerged from the shadows, staff in hand. You speak of fear. You, who would destroy the moon's covenant. Who would strip every wolf of their gift. I'm not destroying anything. I'm offering a choice. Birdie's voice carried through the stone cathedral. The choice your covenant never allowed. To keep the moon's gift or discover what wolves were before she claimed them. Heresy. Torin drew a blade that glowed with moon-blessed silver. The moon herself will judge you for this blasphemy. Then let her come. The council attacked. Not with honor. Not with mercy. With everything they had. Runes carved into the floor blazed to life, containment magic, binding spells, wards designed to suppress shifter power. Silver chains shot from hidden mechanisms. Blades flew through the air. Moon magic itself coalesced into weapons of light and fury. Birdie didn't move. The attacks never reached her. The chains melted before they touched her skin. The blades turned to ash. The moon magic hit the astral field around her and simply stopped. Suspended in air, unable to penetrate the power of something older than the moon herself. Then the moon responded. Moonlight poured through the broken windows with impossible intensity, converging on the council. But not to help them. To judge them. The light struck Torin's throat, burning through flesh with precision that spoke of divine wrath. His scream cut off mid-breath as moonlight seared him from within. Morel fell next, clutching her throat as silver fire consumed her from the inside out. One by one, the council members collapsed, judged by the very power they'd claimed to serve. The moon had seen their corruption. Their lies. Their willingness to murder in her name. And she found them wanting. Only then did Birdie move. She walked to where Torin lay dying, looked down at the man who'd orchestrated her mother's death, who'd tried to break her, who'd called her an abomination. The moon didn't make a mistake when she named me, Birdie said quietly. You did. When you thought you could control her will. Torin's eyes went dark. The cathedral doors burst open. Smith ran in, followed by pack wolves drawn by the surge of power. They stopped dead at the sight before them, the council destroyed, Birdie standing in a pool of astral light, constellations blooming in the air around her like she wore the cosmos itself as a crown. Birdie, Smith started forward. More wolves poured through the doors. Warriors. Families. Elders who'd survived the council's purge. All of them staring at the girl who'd been called weak, worthless, cursed. She killed the council, someone whispered. The moon killed them, another corrected. I saw it. The moon herself struck them down. A warrior stepped forward, one of the ones who'd helped chain Birdie that first day. What are you? Birdie looked at her hands where stars pulsed beneath skin that no longer looked entirely human. I'm what existed before the covenant. Before the moon's gift. Before wolves knew they could be more than what they were born to be. She looked at the gathered pack. I'm Starborn. The last of my kind. And my awakening means you all have a choice. What choice? The warrior's voice shook. To keep your wolves. Keep the moon's gift. Continue as you have for millennia. Birdie felt the power building, the ascension she could no longer stop. Or to let the covenant break. To discover what you might become without the moon's magic binding you. Without the limitations she placed on your ancestors. You're asking us to give up our wolves. Someone in the crowd sounded horrified. I'm asking you to choose freely. What the covenant never allowed. Birdie's feet lifted off the ground. She was ascending now, truly ascending, becoming something between mortal and divine. I can maintain the covenant. Lock my power away. Sacrifice what I am to preserve what you have. That's what the council wanted. What they killed my mother to ensure. Smith moved through the crowd. Don't. Or, Birdie continued, I can ascend fully. Break the covenant. And let every wolf decide for themselves whether to keep the moon's gift or embrace something new. The pack erupted in argument. Fear and fascination warring in every voice. Smith reached her despite the gravity-warping field around her body. He pushed through the astral energy that should have incinerated him, reached up, and took her hand. The mate bond blazed between them. "Don't sacrifice yourself," he said. "Not for them. Not for anyone. But the pack. The pack has survived worse. We'll survive this." His gray eyes held hers. "But I can't survive watching you destroy yourself to maintain a covenant built on murder and lies. Smith." Her voice broke. "If I ascend fully, everything changes. The moon might take your wolf. Take every wolf. You could lose the thing that makes you alpha. That makes you you. Then I lose it." He said it with such certainty that it stole her breath. "I'd rather lose my wolf and keep you than keep my power and watch you cage yourself for eternity." He knelt again. "Not in submission this time. In partnership. In love. Whatever you choose," he said, "I choose you." Birdie felt tears streaming down her face. The power inside her reached critical mass, the ascension inevitable now, unstoppable. She looked at the chains that had bound her wrists, the one Smith had fastened that first day, symbols of everything wrong between them. They still sat on the altar where they'd been discarded after the ceremony. She raised her hand. The chains lifted into the air, glowing with the memory of pain and humiliation and forced vows. Then they melted. Not into metal. Into stardust. Into light that spiraled upward through the broken cathedral ceiling and returned to the cosmos that had birthed the Starborn millennia ago. "I choose freedom," Birdie whispered. The ascension completed. Light exploded outward from her body, not destroying but transforming. It swept through the cathedral, through the fortress, through all of Ironfang and beyond. Every wolf touched by the wave felt it, the covenant loosening, the moon's hold becoming optional rather than absolute. For the first time in recorded history, wolves could choose. Keep the moon's gift. Or discover what lay beneath it. What they were before magic remade them. Birdie descended slowly, her feet touching stone that cracked beneath the weight of divine power. She looked different now. Not quite mortal. Not quite God. Something between. Something new. The mate bond between her and Smith reformed one final time. Not silver. Not gold. But something woven from both, moon and star, wolf and cosmic, equal and chosen. She looked at him. "I don't know what happens now." Smith smiled, actually smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Neither do I. But we'll figure it out together." Behind them, the pack watched in silence as their world reformed. Some wolves felt their gift strengthen, choosing to embrace the moon's power fully. Others felt it loosen, discovering abilities that had been suppressed for generations. A few felt their wolves slip away entirely, and found themselves more human than they'd ever been, and strangely okay with it. The covenant was broken. The age of forced magic had ended. And Birdie Krause, no longer wolfless, no longer weak, no longer chained, walked toward the cathedral doors with Smith beside her. Not as Luna. Not as captive. But as Starborn. As legend reborn. As the girl who'd been dragged back in chains and emerged as the force that freed them all. She paused at the threshold, looked back at the pack one final time. "You're all free now," she said simply. "What you do with that freedom is up to you." Then she walked out into sunlight that bent around her like she was the center of gravity itself. Smith followed without hesitation. Behind them, Ironfang began the slow, painful process of learning what freedom actually meant. And across the world, every pack felt the shift. The loosening. The choice. The age of the Starborn had returned. And nothing would ever be the same. This is it, the end of Birdie's transformation from captive to cosmic power. Drop a comment telling me what you think happens next for Birdie and Smith. Do they start their own pack? Challenge other alphas? Teach wolves about the freedom they now have? Subscribe because this might not be the end of their story. The world is about to respond to what Birdie just unleashed, and not everyone is going to be happy about it.